And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another exciting Australian Indian Radio's daily live update on the weekend edition today. On a day which is quite a little bit gloomy, as you can see behind me. The weather is one for staying indoors today. But anyway, the life goes on and there's a show to be presented. So here we are. Well, the forecast for rest of the Saturday is going to be maximum of 21 and showers. So possible rainfall will be about 8 till about 25 millimeters. And Brisbane area is cloudy and a very high chance, 95% chance of a shower. Well, it's happening right now, easing later in the day and overnight. A chance of thunderstorm from late this morning and light winds. Fire danger, of course, in this kind of conditions will be light to moderate, and the UV rating will reach for 4. So from 9:15 from now till about 1:40 is when we will have to look at those and be on the watch out for those screens. Well, the confirmed cases, the coronavirus, the confirmed cases so far is 1,076 with a recovery rate of 1,063 and 6 deaths. So Australia-wide, the confirmed death so far is 13,595 and the recovery is 8,929 and the deaths 139. Worldwide, 15.6 million and recovery is 8.92 million and the deaths recorded at 633k so far. Well, when you're talking about coronavirus, we'll have to take a look at what are the, where we are with that at this point in time.
Hello, I'm Jeremy Fernandez. Coming up on the virus, the climbing COVID-19 caseload puts authorities on edge. Plus, the financial burden of the pandemic is revealed. Australia posts its biggest budget deficit since World War II. First, though, Victorian officials are boosting resources to fight the outbreaks that are showing little sign of slowing down. Over the past 3 weeks, the number of new cases has been rising steadily. And on Wednesday, a single-day record was set with 484 cases confirmed. The affected areas are now in a 6-week partial lockdown and face masks have become mandatory for residents. The Premier, Daniel Andrews, says he'll have to extend the measures if the numbers don't come down. Another worrying trend is the number of deaths in Victoria. More than 20 people have died this week alone.
Whenever you have hundreds of new cases a day, that there will be several people who are expected to die in the following 2-week period. I'm afraid we will see that.
This is the reality we face, and unless we all follow these rules, then people will either get a fine, it'll take longer to get past this second wave than would otherwise be the case, and people will die.
Most of the recent deaths have come from outbreaks in aged care facilities. These coloured circles represent clusters with more than 10 cases. Confined spaces and high concentrations of frail people are a dangerous mix in this environment, and carers want to be able to move affected residents out of some facilities.
Hospital is the best place for someone who's got COVID to go to get a good health outcome, but we also have additional residents who we're responsible for. There may be another 100 people, and if we want to have a chance of stopping the spread, we actually need to be able to move people to hospital or another facility where they can get the care and treatment that they need.
So let's take a broader look at the figures now. Of the 7,400 cases identified in Victoria, more than 3,700 of them are currently active. As you can see, that figure has jumped dramatically since the start of the month, when there were only a few hundred cases. Those active cases are spreading beyond Victoria's borders too. Every state and territory now has a confirmed active case traced back to outbreaks in and around Melbourne. That's the first time in 11 weeks that all Australian jurisdictions have reported at least one active case. In Victoria, 206 people are in hospital, including 41 in intensive care. And while elderly people are still the main priority for emergency services, people in their 30s, 40s and 50s are also being cared for in medical facilities. Nationally, there have now been more than 13,400 confirmed cases. The high numbers in Victoria even pushed the national 24-hour tally above 500 for the first time nationally. 140 people have now died. Victoria has now recorded more than twice as many cases as New South Wales. This week, local outbreaks became Australia's main source of infections. Previously, most cases were from overseas travellers, but those overseas arrivals have now slowed to a trickle, and local transmissions, both known and unknown sources, now account for the majority of the spread. The growing number of cases in New South Wales, meanwhile, has forced authorities to reintroduce some restrictions. Over the past 2 weeks, the caseload has been consistent, peaking at 20 cases on Monday. Group bookings at restaurants, cafes and clubs will now be limited to 10 people. The number of patrons inside any venue will be capped at 300. Weddings and corporate events will be limited to 150 people. And only 100 people are allowed to attend funerals and places of worship.
If there is a business or an organisation that are blatantly flouting the law and putting public health at risk, I will be the first to name and shame and condemn them.
The government says it'll keep aiming to suppress the virus instead of taking the approach of eliminating the virus altogether. If National Cabinet were to pursue elimination, more severe lockdown measures would be put in place in the affected areas. Doctors say this second surge in Victoria shows why a stronger approach is needed. The Prime Minister says he thinks, though, National Cabinet is getting the mix right so far.
There will always be cases that come because Australia has not completely shut itself off from the world. To do so would be reckless. But that no community transmission, when the vast majority of states and territories have been at now effectively for some time, and that's certainly where we want to get back to in Victoria and New South Wales, and that's where our efforts are focused.
So those climbing caseloads in the nation's two most populous states have the authorities worried. Earlier I spoke with the ABC's medical reporter Sophie Scott and the University of Melbourne epidemiologist Professor Tony Blakely for their perspectives.
So that's the update there on the coronavirus. As we know, it is rather alarming what's happening down south, and here in Queensland our challenge is to try and keep as safe as we can. As we know, there have been some very tough and hard decisions made by many organizations, but responsible decisions in wake of the threat that's there, that just in case something does happen. One such case is of the Gopio, Queensland, and they have postponed their India Day Fair dinner, which was going to be held at the City Hall. There's just far too much at stake, mainly the health reasons and the safety and well-being of many people, and acting responsibly in a time and in a situation like this. So I think it was a decision that was well taken. Let's take a very quick look at the week that it was. Well, it has been a very, very busy week. As we know, we had the launch of Pinky Singh's campaign in the Valley, and good to see that the music hall is going to be reopening again. And then, of course, we had the White Ribbon Revival. And with that, we launched the Southside Committee right here in Brisbane. But Brad Chilcott, our National Director, was here as well. Queensland will be headed by Chu Hing Ching as the chairperson. I will be assisting him as the vice chair of all the Queensland committees. And we are busy reforming all those committees right now, Emerald, Rockhampton and all the regional areas. As we know, Queensland is quite a large area. And of course, then we had the launch of the big Kookaburra with Fabadine, and a wonderful thing to see that. Let's hear a little bit from him before we move on.
And everybody's tired, but I don't know the word tired, what it means when it comes to the encouragement, support and energy that you guys are providing here. Thank you. I have a lot to say. First of all, the traditional owners of this land, I am indebted to them for the stories. program.
So that was the launch of the Kookaburra at in Diddley Street, and we know it was attended by many invited people, and Minister Hinchcliffe was there as well, and the Kookaburra has begun its journey all the way to Townsville. As we know, my dear friend Fabadeen Deliri runs the Intercultural Festival in Townsville, and he's been doing that for so many years. It's a big festival. I've been there quite a few times as a guest, and I think he does a wonderful job trying to bring together, the 3 days of activities, having a Bollywood night in there as well. So it is wonderful to see how he's managed to bring the communities together. In his speech yesterday, he said you need to think outside the square, and he said definitely in his case, and being in Townsville, that always comes true, that you have to look and think outside the square. When he came up with this idea of the Kookaburra, some of the people said, what are you going to do? So here it is. It's not only become viral here in Australia, worldwide. That news has been picked out worldwide. Even Americans say, why can't we have a Kookaburra here in order to bring about peace and prosperity amongst all the people? So that's what he's been able to do. Well, of course, then we had the big forum with Minister Cameron Dick as the community forum, which was attended by many people, and everyone took part and discussed so many things that affect our multicultural community. So it was wonderful to see that he was there in person, joining us in the Zoom meeting and giving his valuable input. And of course the Premier, as usual, always
investing in our children's future is fundamental. Just as we're investing in health and looking after the health of Queenslanders, I'm absolutely determined to invest in our children's future when it comes to making sure that they have the school education that they need. Minister Grace and I had the opportunity to open the new Baringa Primary School, and today we met with some of the students, Year 6s, who will be the first Year 7s at this brand new high school that we are building. It will grow to a high school of around 2,000 students. I can also announce today the official name of the new high school, and it might not come as any surprise to people, but it's going to be called the Baringa State Secondary College. This investment is needed for the area. It's hundreds of jobs. This high school alone is $127 million, 382 jobs and 14 apprentices. This is clearly demonstrated in this area here, where we are seeing 10 families a week moving into this area. And I've just also come from the Lee Street Special School. A big shout out to all the students there. They were very excited to see that they're also getting an expansion to their special school at Caboolture there.
This is an amazing investment in the future of our children, in the future of these growing communities. These are some of the fastest growing communities in Queensland, and we are building the infrastructure to meet that demand. And I can see the smile on the faces of the students that are looking forward to coming here next year.
And that is a wonderful news, and that's the kind of infrastructure that is needed right here in Queensland, investment into schools. And we have seen that there's some other special schools that have been initiated and launched, and so that is a move in the right direction. So ladies and gentlemen, with that we are at the halfway mark of the show today, and let's take a commercial break with our sponsors, GlobeNet Realty.
ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी 1989 से लेकर अब तक का विश्वसनीय और माननीय ब्रिस्बेन का रियल एस्टेट एजेंट है। उषा चंद्रा, जो कि ग्लोबनेट की डायरेक्टर है, अपने ग्राहकों को ईमानदार और एथिक सर्विसेज देती हैं। अगर आप ब्रिस्बेन की प्रॉपर्टी में पूंजी लगाना चाहते हैं और आप चाहते हैं कि आपकी प्रॉपर्टी को प्रोफेशनली मैनेज किया जाए, तो आप आज ही कांटेक्ट कीजिए उषा चंद्रा को। लैंडलाइन नंबर है 38654466 और मोबाइल नंबर है 0419775416। और आप प्रॉपर्टी की अधिक जानकारी और करंट अपडेट्स के लिए हमारी वेबसाइट पे लॉगिन कर सकते हैं। हमारी वेबसाइट है www.globenetreality.com.au। ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी आपका अपना लोकल रियल एस्टेट एजेंट है। हमारा पता है ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी, शॉप नंबर 5, 2281 सैंडगेट रोड, बुंदल, क्वींसलैंड। ग्लोबनेट रियलिटी, रियल एस्टेट इज अवर वर्ल्ड।
And it definitely is the world. Well, right now it's time to look at news in brief. Number one, Turkey's president joins thousands in the first prayers at Hagia Sophia. Turkey's President Tayyip Erdogan joined thousands of worshippers at the Hagia Sophia for the first prayer since he declared the monument a mosque again. So as we know, there had been lots of talks about that monument, whether it was a monument or as a mosque. So it's now been declared that it's a mosque once again, and these are the first prayers that were held there.
Muhterem kardeşlerim, tilavet secdesine hazır olalım. Allahu Ekber. Semi'na ve ata'na gufraneke Rabbena ve ileykel masir.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ثم توليتم من بعد ذلك فلولا فضل الله عليكم ورحمته.
And that's wonderful to see. Right at this point in time, everyone is worried about what is going to happen, what is the economic outlook for the country, and how are we going to get out of this depression, whether we are in a depression or a recession. We talked about that yesterday, but with that, right now, let's look at the finance with Philip Lashkar.
Turning to finance now, concerns about the spread of coronavirus have again dominated sentiment on the markets. Both the Australian dollar and share market finished the week lower. Here's Philip Lasker.
Yesterday's economic update looks dated already, given events in Victoria. Those events also suggest the economy will need more support than this. In the fourth quarter of this year, the government's extended support dropped sharply to under 5% of GDP. That's why it's likely Canberra will be throwing more money around. Hopefully, it won't be too little too late. The coronavirus also made its mark on global equity markets. We saw US jobless claims rise, triggering concerns about America's recovery. Add to that worries about stalled stimulus talks, rising US-China trade tensions, and fears of a tech bubble. With all that going on, the Australian market didn't stand a chance. The tech sector was sold off here as well. Insurer IAG scrapped its dividend and warned of a 70% slump in earnings. Even gold miners got hit. Commodities went the same way as shares, including bullion. The extraordinary economic events will keep coming. Next week, we'll see the weakest quarterly inflation reading on record, around minus 1.8% for the June quarter, which means annual inflation will be negative. Free childcare played a part, but there was a general weakness. This is dangerous. Inflation expectations at multi-year lows, close to zero. Expectations can keep inflation low because it influences people's behaviour. They don't expect wage increases and they might stop spending while they wait for lower prices. It can become a downward spiral. The Australian dollar has been knocked off its perch. It's a little under 71 US cents, and that's finance.
And the dollar, which was 71 yesterday, 70.9 today, well, it's still pretty good. Now, you remember the case in 2017, and this has always been discussed, and is police. So when police, are delivering, in deliverance of their duties, in their rightful deliverance of their duties, many times they have to use force. Because they don't know the given circumstances or what the other person might be doing. But there have been many incidences where they have been quoted as being, having used far too much power and pressure than was required. But under those circumstances, sometimes it's very hard to make that call. But the 3 Victorian police officers who assaulted that man in 2017 outside his Melbourne home, they have been found guilty. Here's that footage from 2017. And as we know now that the three have been found guilty of assault. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Australian Indian Radio's weekend edition of the Facebook Live updates. Western Australia's Premier Mark McGowan announces the delay in Phase 5. Now, they were going quite well with all the phases. They've gone up to Phase 4, but Phase 5, which was going to be announced, has been put on hold for now. Phase 5 of the East coronavirus restrictions in Western Australia will be delayed by at least another 2 weeks, and here's the reasoning from the Premier.
The serious situation in Victoria still playing out, and with New South Wales being monitored closely, our Chief Health Officer has recommended a further delay on Phase 5 easing of restrictions. Phase 5 would have seen the removal of Western Australia's nation first 2 square metre rule and the removal of the 50% capacity limit for our major venues. Therefore, which would have meant the removing of all controls except for our hard borders and restrictions on entering remote Aboriginal communities. Western Australia led the nation in easing restrictions and has allowed us to get back to normal in a COVID-safe way. But there is no need to take any risks right now. That's why we've accepted the health advice and we will be delaying the introduction of Phase 5 until at least Saturday, August 15. This is a further 2-week delay. And I stress August 15 is a tentative date only. We will provide clarity on if we can proceed with this timeline about a week out from August 15. Look, I understand people's fears, but the bigger threat is that if the virus came in and it was allowed to spread, and the medical advice we got was very clear, the situation in Victoria and New South Wales means we have to be cautious. And I also think by delaying Phase 5, we're sending a very strong message to the public that we're not out.
So that's the news from Western Australia, and they're going to put on hold for at least another 2 weeks, and they're going to delay that because of what's happening in Victoria. Now going to New Zealand, we heard about that Cadiz Iranian refugee Behrouz Boochani, and he's been granted asylum in New Zealand. New Zealand once again opening up its arms, and let's hear from him as to what he's going to say about that, as he says that this is a new leaf in his life and a new chapter.
So I look at it like end of a chapter of my life. And I feel happy because I have certainty about my future, so which is great. But in other side, it's really difficult because still this policy exists, and still people are in indefinite detention in Australia, in Port Moresby, in Nauru, and still the Australian government continues to this policy to torture people, and yeah, it's terrible when you look at people in.
So it is wonderful that New Zealand has, granted him that political asylum. South Australia's hard border with Victoria will apply to South Australians. So the hard border with Victoria will now extend to all people travelling from the state, including South Australians. So South Australia's hard border with Victoria will now extend. And let's hear from the Premier there.
Most importantly of concern is that the vast majority of the cases which have been identified in recent weeks are still under investigation. This means they don't know the origin. They do not have that epi-link, and this is something which is of great concern. In Victoria, or in Australia, 95% of all of our cases in the past 2 weeks have come from Victoria. Worryingly, what we are seeing is the largest age group for people that are becoming infected in Victoria are the 20 to 29 age group. So a very different situation from what we have here in South Australia. This week we have 3 new cases. All 3 of those have come across the border from Victoria, and in a few moments Professor Spurrier will be able to provide an update to us on the case that was announced yesterday. But we do remain very concerned about what is happening in Victoria. We have a hard border arrangement with Victoria. We do not plan to lift this anytime soon, and in fact, as of midnight on Tuesday night, we will be extending that ban on Victorians coming across the border to all citizens, including South Australians coming across that border. We've got to do everything we can now to protect ourselves against seeding from Victoria coming across that border. Other decisions that we have made this week and that we announce now include that we will be putting a cap on home gatherings at 50. There will be now a cap on weddings and funerals at 100. These caps come into effect as of Tuesday at midnight. As I said, no changes to the ACT New South Wales border. We still allow citizens.
Tasmania is one of the safest places on the planet, and in public health's view, so are South Australia, the Northern Territory and Western Australia, which are equally as safe. And so after a review and assessment by our public health officials and with a range of additional border safety measures which will be put in place at our sea and airports, we intend to create safe travel bubbles with those three states, South Australia, the Northern Territory and Western Australia. This will occur in 2 weeks' time on Friday the 7th of August. The Good to Go app, or the paper form if people can't access the app, will need to be filled out accurately in terms of where passengers may have been in the past 14 days, and there will be fines of up to $16,800 or up to 6 months jail for those who provide incorrect information. Implementing from the 7th of August will allow our health and biosecurity officials the time to put in place our new safety measures at our airports and seaports. This will include, for every passenger, a mandatory health check. All passenger arrivals will be checked. Anyone that is identified as being unwell or having symptoms will be required to take a mandatory COVID test. This will be conducted at the airport and at our seaports. After testing, those people who've had the test must remain in hotel or home quarantine until they receive the results of those tests. Refusal to have a test will result in mandatory hotel quarantine for 14 days, or they will be directed to return home on the next flight. The TT line will continue to operate under their current arrangements, and passengers will not be carried if they don't have a Tasmanian address or are an essential traveller. The TT line will not be able to bring West Australians or South Australians or those from the Northern Territory to Tasmania. Furthermore, from next Friday the 31st of July, we will be insisting on mandatory testing for essential workers at our airports and at our seaport.
So that's the update there from Tasmania. And as I was saying just before we introduced this clip, we had seemed to have lost the sound, and thanks Devika that you are keeping a tab. So wonderful to have your company once again, and amazing work that you're doing out there. So what I was saying just before we began this clip was that, this is Australian Indian Radio's weekend edition, and we're trying to cover all the different states. So we've heard from Western Australia, South Australia, and now we just heard from Tasmania, which is opening up its borders with a Good to Go app from 7th of August. Now, all the clips that we put together is sourced from ABC, from BBC, from RSTV, from the Reuters, and the copyright belongs with the original owners. What we're trying to do here is bring together small snippets of those coverage which is out in the public domain and put together in a show format that might be of interest to our community, and current affairs and things that are topical, which are happening right now and which might be of interest to many people. So once again, Devika, thank you so much for that. Right now, we've looked at all the states. Let's go to the troubled state of Victoria and see what Premier Daniel Andrews has to say.
What I wanted to discuss today is part of our unique partnership with the Australian Defence Force, a long-standing partnership, one that has seen until the last couple of weeks about 350 members of the ADF on the ground. That's been bolstered. It's now in excess of 1,400, and we're very grateful to all of those staff. In my discussions with Commodore Hill and others, they are absolutely doing fantastic work for us. They're well and truly integrated to both enable, assist and advise. And it's a really important contribution. There are many others as well, whether it be from other Victorian government agencies or Commonwealth public servants that are playing an equally important part. But I wanted to focus on one particular issue today, where we are deploying ADF personnel in an innovative and a unique way. So today's case is 300 cases. Each of those people, attempts will be made to contact those within the next 24 hours. Many of them will be contacted much, much sooner than that, but the aim is to have every single one of them contacted within 24 hours. That's not always possible, principally because some people won't answer the phone, some people, a much smaller number, may answer the phone but are not particularly interested in making a time to sit down and go through that rather that longer process to be interviewed about all their close contacts. That's about the number of people that we can't contact. And again, we're not making judgments about those people. In the main, it'll just be playing phone tag, if you like, back and forth, but not actually connecting with those people. That can be up to about 25%. It is unacceptable that we have anybody not contacted within that 24-hour period. And when I say contacted, not just a phone call outbound, but an actual interview conducted. What we're going to do, and this has happened the last 3 or 4 days to be proven up, when it's now going to be dramatically expanded. There will be some 28 teams of ADF personnel and authorised officers from the Department of Health. They will go out in the following circumstances. So one of those 300 people who's tested positive today, they are telephoned. They are telephoned again within a 2-hour period. If contact cannot be made with them via those 2 telephone calls in a 2-hour period, then ADF and authorised officers will be deployed to go and door knock those people and to conduct that interview on their doorstep, as opposed to doing it over the phone. It's not about making judgments about people being willing or otherwise. It's just a practical challenge in any list of people.
And challenging the situation is for him very challenging. What can a man do? You know, he's trying his best, and we know that there have been many letdowns, and we've seen the cases of the security guards, not being trained well and just being put into the place as and when they were available to come in. So these are sometimes, things that need to be taken into account. But right now, let's hear from our treasurer. Sometimes they get asked so many questions, but, in this case, at this point in time, if they want to increase the numbers of people here in Australia, and if there is a problem with getting the numbers, borders are closed, what do we do? So he got asked, and look at the smile on his face when he answers that question.
He said that growth is key, but according to the economic update, one thing that's barely growing is the population. Overseas migration's down, the fertility rate has fallen. Given that you can't reopen the borders just yet, what incentives are you going to provide Australians to start having more babies to try and encourage the next baby boom?
Well, you are absolutely right. With that population growth effectively being halved from 1.2 down to 0.6, that takes into account both the migration levels but also the fertility rates. I think the best thing that we can do to encourage more children being born across the country is obviously to create a strong economy for them to be born into. We've provided lots of incentives for families. We've provided much increased funding for childcare. And of course, we are very much supporting families across the board in terms of our policies. So I won't go as far as to say, like Peter Costello, one for the mother, one for the father and one for the country. But I can say, but what I can say is people should feel encouraged about the future, and the more children that we have across the country, together with our migration, will build our population growth, and that will be good for the economy.
And that was quite well handled. Well, we will finish off today with the Prime Minister as he confirms the suppression remains as a national strategy.
A couple of other points that were agreed on today was an affirmation of the suppression strategy that we've been working to nationally now for many, many months from the outset. The goal of that is obviously, and has always been, no community transmission. There will always be cases that come because Australia has not completely shut itself off from the world. To do so would be reckless. But that no community transmission, when the vast majority of states and territories have been at now effectively for some time, and that's certainly where we want to get back to in Victoria and New South Wales, and that's where our efforts are focused. We also adopted an important principle, but this is particularly relevant in times of outbreak, is the need to ensure that your emergency response and your health response are integrated. There is a health response, which Professor Kelly can speak to you about, but there is also emergency management responses, supporting towns, particularly in regional areas and things of that nature, and there's a lot of logistics and coordination that needs to go into the emergency response, and so the health and emergency side of these things must be fully integrated. That is substantially occurring, and we've just decided to tighten up those processes and procedures.
And as he's mentioned that we'll need to tighten up those procedures, and health and emergency state are always of prime importance. Right now, let's finish off with a very quick look at the upcoming events. As I mentioned, this gala dinner has been postponed. And ladies and gentlemen, with that, I need to say goodbye. It's been wonderful having your company. I know we lost the sound for a little bit in between, but we got it back again. So it's been wonderful having your company. And with this, I need to say goodbye. And as the news there says that, you know, this show might include material from IFP, APTN, Reuters, IAP, CNN, ABC, BBC, RSTV, 9 Network, Channel 7 and other services. The material is sourced from public domain and elaborated upon copyright, including audio, remains the property of the original owners. The intention of the show is to bring together a compilation of publicly available posts into a story format. So with that, I need to say goodbye. So have a wonderful weekend, whatever's left of it. Be careful, stay safe. We'll see you next time.